Well, good morning, AVB. Wow, it's great to be here and great to be in Las Vegas. You know, I love that video, but I got to take you back, to put it into context, back to 2013. It was a time in America when people weren't feeling so good about our economy. We had newscasters on TV saying we were headed for a double-dip recession, which wasn't even close to being true. And you just had gone through the 08 and 09 Great Depression. And in that context, somebody from this audience raised their hand and asked me a question. They said, Joe, do you think that now's a good time to invest in our businesses? Given from where we've been to where we're going, do you think it's a good time? And my answer was, well, yeah, I see a 10-year cycle coming. I could see it in the numbers of growth in America. And then I said, you'd have wealth and prosperity. Now, what I didn't know, and I have to laugh at myself here, is that I didn't realize that all the wealth and prosperity part would come in the last 2 years. I mean, who could have guessed that, right? But I think that what's important here is what happened. I think sales were up, as Jim said. You saw margins improve. You took share from Lowe's, Best Buy, and Home Depot. And behind you the entire time was the support from AVB and its partnering groups. So congratulations to all of you. I think that's a big deal. And you've had a great year. Jim asked me to come here today and talk to you about the economy, and I'm going to do that. I know you've probably seen me before. So you're going to hear about the economy. I'm also going to talk about labor shortages, because I understand that's a big issue for everybody in this country. And then last, I'm going to end with inflation. But let me just step out of my presentation for a second and say this, because in the last week or so, we've seen some horrific images of Ukraine. And I have great compassion for the people there and what they're going through. And I don't want to be insensitive, but I have to give this presentation today about the numbers. So I want you to know that between the Ukraine and Russia, these are very small economies. They don't impact America in any major way except in oil, natural gas, and of course gasoline. And I'll talk about that about the end of the presentation. So let me start with the economy. And I always begin with consumer confidence, how we feel about the economy. You know, whether or not we think we're going to have a job or a paycheck in our future. Let me take you back to the beginning of the pandemic, March 2020. And we saw confidence drop to a 7-8-year low, 85.7. Now, anything below 90 is a shrinking economy. Well, since that time, we've gone up 24 points, and now the confidence level is at 110. Any move of 10 points is significant. And not only that, but over 100 is an expanding economy, and that's where we're at today. And that's why your businesses have been good the last couple of years. Even in the midst of a pandemic, it was tough. So if we're feeling good, then my prediction about where we're going, and if every time you see a red rectangle with writing on it like that in red, it means it's a prediction I'm making for the year. I believe by the end of this year, confidence could be as high as 124. And if we don't have another mutation of COVID-19, it could be 130, and that puts us at all-time highs, or close to all-time highs. So that's good news. So if we're feeling good, we have confidence, then we spend money. Consumer spending, what do you guys spend every day in our economy? Consumer spending, 72% of GDP, and we're the largest consumer economy in the world, bar none. Everybody wants to do business in America because of the size and strength of our economy. Let me have you look at this graph here. This is where we've been. This is a 10-year graph. And you see that fall off right there on the far right side of the graph? That's the beginning of COVID-19. And ever since we hit the bottom of that, every day, every week, every month, you've spent more money until you get to today, and we're now at all-time highs in consumer spending. So what's my prediction? Where do I think we're going? Well, by the end of this year, I think we'll be up 3.6%. Let me put that in context for you. 3.2% has been about a 10-year average in terms of consumer spending. This is a very strong number. It means it's good for you and your retail business overall. So if we're feeling good and we spend money, then people have jobs in America. And this is my favorite part of the presentation because I get to talk about job shortages, because something really unique happened in our economy, and economists are always interested in stuff like this. Let me take you back to January of last year. Unemployment hit 6.4%. That's not good. And a lot of people didn't think we'd get below that, but we did. We created 7 million jobs in the last year, and just last month, in January, and I'll talk about February later, 467,000 jobs in January. Now, here's what's interesting about what happened. All those jobs were created in January as well, and unemployment, which was at 3.9% in December, it rose to 4%. How can that happen? I mean, here we are creating all these jobs, and unemployment doesn't go down, it actually goes up. Well, the way we measure the employment numbers is that if people come back into the economy, they can actually raise the unemployment numbers. That's exactly what happened. That means for labor shortages, for all of you, we're finally seeing now Americans coming back into the labor market. I think that's good for you in the longer term. Now, outside the presentation, because I didn't have time to get it in this one, but last Friday, we created nearly 700,000 jobs, which is a great push as we move into the year, and the unemployment rate dropped to 3.8%. So what's my prediction? Where do I think it's going to go? Well, I believe that by the end of this year, we'll see unemployment at 3.3%. That'll be the lowest rate since 1952. Think about that. Wow. Now, that's not just me saying that. I saw that from UBS, Citibank, and Goldman Sachs. The Harvard Business School said it. And even on one of your phone calls with Wells Fargo, they also said 3.3%. And there's a Fed president in St. Louis, James Bulliard, and he made the comment recently, you can Google this. He said he thinks the unemployment rate could hit 2.5%, which would be an all-time low in America. 2.5%, can you imagine that? With 11 million jobs available right now and 7 million people unemployed? Yeah, I think that's a definite possibility, but I'm going to go with 3.3. So if we're feeling good and we're spending cash and we're employed, then GDP, gross domestic product, all goes up and we all rise with it. That's what happens in this economy. How do you define GDP? It's the amount of goods and services we produce in 1 year in America. Services, things like we're doing here, travel and leisure, dining out. 75% of our economy is made up of services. Goods, 25% of our economy, is what you all sell in this room. Now, what's happened in the last 2 years, and the reason why your business has been so good, is that all the services spending, the 75%, has been moved over to the goods and making their houses look better. That's what we do. And we measure economies by one number at the end of the year. How did we do last year? One number. Last year, we ended the year at 5.7%. That's the highest increase in GDP since 1984. Let me repeat that. Last year, we had the best year since 1984, 5.7%. Now, I'm going to be fair here. We spent $5 trillion in our economy in stimulus money from 2020 to 2021. $3 trillion in 2021, $2 trillion in 2022, and that number raises GDP. It does. That's what happens. So, what's going to happen this coming year? This year, here's one of my predictions. We'll end the year at 3.4%. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, come on, Joe, we went from 5.7 to 3.4? Well, yeah, because we don't have any stimulus money in this year's economy. But keep in mind that 3.4% is still higher than our 10-year average, 5 or 10-year average, 2.3%. So we're going to have a good year because we're starting off at the highest level ever of GDP after last year. So that's a good number, and hopefully you guys all feel good about that. So there you go. That's what our year looks like. I think it's going to be positive. I think it's going to be good for all of you. Let me touch on inflation for just a minute, because I think this is also really important that we all understand what's going on here. In the last year, we saw inflation go up 7.5%. And that means that if you had $100 in your pocket and you had it there the whole year, right now it buys $93 or less of stuff. Okay? That's inflation, and that's what we're dealing with right now. Here's what the Fed's going to do about it, though. So next week, Thursday and Friday, they're going to have a meeting. And they're going to raise probably interest rates for the first time. We think, economists believe that they're going to raise interest rates 5 to 7 times during the course of the year, starting this month, right? So right away. Now, the Fed's late. I mean, I wish they would have done this last summer, but they're late. Even Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, even says that they're late. But here's what they're trying to do. They're trying to slowly pull back the economy, raising them 1/4 point, probably the first time, and then who knows after that, we'll see. But they'll pull it back slowly because back in 1981 and 1982, Paul Volcker, he pulled back too fast and caused a double-dip recession 2 years in a row. We don't want that. We don't want to see that. That's never a good thing. Now, the cycle that we're in right now, the biggest problem is used cars and new cars. Used cars up 40%, new cars up 10%. A lot of reasons for that I don't have time to get into. We know that essentials in the economy are also suffering. You're all feeling these 3 things: electricity, food, and rent. They're all up as well. And here's the part about oil, and I got to make this clear. I couldn't put a number in there that's been stable since I started doing this. And when Jim first asked me to do this, the price of a barrel of Brent crude was $80. Yesterday, it went to almost 140, hit a high and closed around 128. I know that you all see that, where I have a home in Washington, and in one day it went up 60 cents. And I know that it's probably similar to that all around the country. And I know that those of you that live in California, I know you're really suffering because I have a home in California and I know what the price is there as well. It's really tough. But that's Brent Crude. But let me say this, because I know that we're all worried about that. You guys drive all these huge trucks, you deliver appliances and TVs and furniture in. You probably get 10 miles a gallon and gas is going to be a real problem for you. Back in 2008, a barrel of oil cost $148, 2008. In 5 months, it was $37. So we never know where it's going to go. We don't know right now what's going to go happen in Ukraine. That could change everything, I say today, based on what the possibilities are. But right now, this is what we're living with, and we're going to have to live with it for a while. Okay, let me just end with some good news, I think, for all of you. First of all, I would say that, as you heard, I think some people say, shortages and back orders, they won't go away, but they'll improve. I talked to almost all your suppliers, and that's what they told me. There'll be availability to labor this year better than you saw last year. I told you how that number is moving up as Americans come back into the labor force. This is the number that I think is interesting. Economists are saying that 25 to 30% of Americans won't go back to services. Dining out as much as they used to or traveling. They're still going to hold back because there's some reticence to go there. And that means that they'll spend money on goods and goods in your case. So that's why I think you're going to have a good year. 30% of Americans is 100 million people. And then high home equity rates, the highest we've ever seen in our history. Research says that when equity rates are high, remodeling goes up. And of course, that's what the Joint Center for Housing Studies out of Harvard, they're saying that by the end of the year, if you look over here to the far right, that we'll see rates of remodeling up at near 20%, which would be an all-time high. So with that, I'll just end with this. I think my job, I always felt my job is to make people feel hopeful. I mean, I always give you the real numbers. I never fudge on the numbers or stuff. But I want you, when you go back to your businesses, to have confidence in the American economy and where it's going to be. We're the most resilient, the most productive, most diverse economy in the world by far. No one's even close to America. Not China, not Japan, nobody in the Eurozone. We are all by ourselves. It's like Ronald Reagan said. Back in the 80s, America is like the shining city on the hill that everybody looks up to and respects. We've been the #1 economy in the world since 1920. We've had 100 years of performance. So I think you can count on it as we move forward. But let me say this, I have a reputation, I think, sometimes of being too optimistic, maybe talking too much about America's size and strength. And I'll tell you today that I believe that the real strength in America is people like you. People that take a risk and start a business and create jobs. You're the job creators in this country. And I'm always proud to talk about our great country and always proud and happy to be with such a great group like this. So thank you all for having me. I'm going to be here at the show. If you see me around, stop me, ask me any question you want about the economy. I'm always willing to talk to all my friends out here in the audience. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim. Thank you so much.